Welcome back to this session, this afternoon session, for us at least. It is called, the title is Post-Normal Science in Practice. And it relates to a European project, Horizon 2020, which the full title is Moving Towards Adaptive Governance in Complexity. And we call it MAGIC, okay? And MAGIC is the first attempt, large-scale attempt, to apply the insights of post-normal science to a debate about quality of policies related to sustainability in collaboration with a range of stakeholders. Although it is based on MAGIC, we think it has a more universal, more general message. And what we are trying to do here is to share with you what we learn in trying to have a post-normal science in MAGIC and MAGIC in post-normal science. And so an important thing, if you look at the chat, you will see that that we have some links there already. The videos are already in the YouTube channel of Post-Normal Science Symposium, and you also have some more background material for you to read and be, more conversant with the subject that we are going to discuss here. The speakers, we have 5, will only here present some highlights with 7-8 minutes or so. So we have plenty of time for conversation later. Okay, so for those interested in going deeper into the subject of the presentations, then you have the links. Hopefully you'll find the whole thing interesting, and just for you, just anticipating that after the time when we finish at 4:30 our time, more or less, you can look at your Hopin desk, and you see there is something called sessions, and in the sessions you have the coffee place. So it's nice if people meet later at the coffee place just to continue the conversation on the subject. Okay, no more. I am going to introduce now Mario Giampietro, who from the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and he is the coordinator of the MAGIC project, and he is going to talk about quantitative storytelling and uncomfortable knowledge, mainly results from the MAGIC project. Mario, it's yours.
Yes, I need to have the opportunity of sharing my screen, because at the moment I cannot. Okay. So what are the lessons learned in MAGIC? Basically, I will go very quick. I hope that you already saw the video. Basically, I will go to 3 points, 2 shortly, and then the third one more related to post-normal science. One is one of the major problems that we have at the moment, that we cannot see what the problems are, because we are framing all the sustainability discussion using economic narratives. They cannot see exactly what are the problems. Then the second lesson has been that it's possible to avoid hypocognition by using complexity and what we call quantitative storytelling. And then we will have some general lesson learned about the importance of using post-normal science. So what is the first result? Is that the sustainability problem is not about lack of resources or the fact that we cannot react. Look, the COVID showed that we can react very fast in 2 days, put all people in the house with no problem. The only problem is that If we are using economic narratives are based on the existence of price. Price means moderate scarcity, that basically you have a demand and supply. This implies that you don't have a sustainability problem, because a sustainability problem is when you cannot have an adequate supply. So basically, it is a bizarre situation in which we are using narrative. They assume that it's impossible to have sustainability problem to study sustainability problem. What is the result? The result is easy to show. This is the killing curve, is the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere for the last 60 years. And then you have all these meetings in which people react, make agreement, they applaud, they cry, they laugh, they say, we saved the world, yes, we did it, and basically nothing happened. So after decades of failure in climate policy, why doing more of the same should get different results? So basically is that the way we are framing the problem in a way that we cannot use the feedback from the external world is cutting the possibility of being reflexive about what we do and about learning. So what is the second result? The second result is, if rather than having a simplistic model, then say what is the best thing to do and so on, we will start using what we call quantitative storytelling, that is using different concern, different narrative, different perception about the problem, referring to different scale, different dimension, and telling different stories, you could get a much better understanding. So we don't claim that our quantitative storytelling presents the truth about a given issue, but is a way of getting additional perspective on it. Just to give you an example, if you have a pretty defined problem, is how to monitor and study the pandemic, you may have an emergency committee that this was not about how to handle, but at least to monitoring the things. And then you may have the members of the panel that have more or less an expertise is related to what you have to address. Let's imagine that now we are looking at the different problems, how to decarbonize Europe. And then let's look at the panel and say, what are the concerns to be addressed? What is the academic background that would be required to discuss about decarbonization? So this is actually the expertise of the panel. There is a professor of theoretical physics, an ex-minister of economic affairs, all economists, a couple of insurance and law, plus a board member of a privately owned fragrance and flavor company, and an inventor with 80 patent families in the sector of biopolymers. I'm not sure that what was in the mind of the person that selected this committee. The problem is that when I wanted to discuss over energy, I studied energetics. This is my old book at the university. And then why this is important is that who is selecting the quality of the process of production and use of information, and who is selecting those selecting it. Let's see what happens if we put in this panel, for instance, an expert of energetics. This is the most famous expert of energetics in the world. By the way, is in our advisory board. And then is one very popular person among the business people. He basically is writing books, and then he's going around in the boards of banks and investment funds. So the question is, why businessmen and people working in investment fund look for uncomfortable knowledge while you institutions don't? And then this is deep, because even assuming that we would like to keep an economic reasoning, in already in 1921, Frank Knight made clear that there is a difference between risk and uncertainty. This was before post-normal science. That is, we have to face the fact that we have a lack of any quantifiable knowledge about some possible occurrence. So in this case, it doesn't make any sense to have optimizing model or prediction of the future. Why this is important? Because what Václav Havel is advising the people of investment fund of large banks is to how to protect their asset under uncertainty. This is why you need information. You don't need information to predict the future or to say what is the best thing to do. what is general, the type of information used, for instance, the commission when they go into the integrated assessment mode. So we led to the third result, the set of results of MAGIC. Just one question. Before moving to the next session, you can look at the chat. We just finished to have a new section in the website about that is called lecture. And then you have a series of videos and material about different type of quantitative storytelling about uncomfortable knowledge for biofuel, alternative energy, electricity, agriculture, efficiency, you name it. Okay, so they are very nice. If you want to go, you will have fun. So the last problem is about the MAGIC result. And then the idea is to moving away from governance of complexity, we cannot predict and control, and toward governance in complexity. We want to have a caring and reflexive economy, but of course nobody knows how to do it, so we have to learn all together. There are two major lessons from postnormal science, is that in order to decide what is the problem, how to solve it, you have to have identification of concern and what are the priority of this concern. And on the other side, in the scientific sphere, what are the relevant knowledge claims and what type of representation you can do using these claims. Putting together the two things, you have a framing of a problem. But the framing of the problem is not a scientific issue. It's the quality of the framing of the problem depends on the fitness for purpose. And this decision depends on who is us, who decides who is us, and which type of anticipation of our interaction with external world is relevant. Is we are optimizing profit, or we are guaranteeing food for our children, we are protecting the environment, really depend the concern and what are the knowledge claims. This is the last slide, so Silvio could be what MAGIC propose. That we have to have three typology of quality check. One, on the justification narratives, why we are doing it. On the normative narratives, what should we do? And on the explanation narrative, how do we know that what we do is what has to be done? So these three different narratives require three completely different typologies of check. One is about who decides the concern, the priority, why this and not the other. Another one is not about making prediction or whatever, simply check what we are proposing is feasible when I look at it across different dimensions, across different domains. And then the last one is what type of information is missing? Can we do it better? What's fair? What we involve people in co-production and in a fair deliberation. And in this, I would like to thank all the participants, all the members of the consortium, because this has been a totally crazy project, and they really did an outstanding work, working for a year, doing whatever. You can get on the Magic Nexus website to see the results.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, last but not least, I would like to thank Sandra, that really is the project manager. She did an incredible job in trying to keep together the whole story through a pretty bumpy ride of this project.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. It was excellent, and I think we are doing well. And I have to take advantage of this opportunity to thank our, let's say, team that made possible this virtual meeting, this virtual CIS. As you know, there are always gremlins, and we expect them. But we had Ângela and Dorothy and Paolo in the background working, not only from a scientific point of view, because they have presentation to do, but solving all these technical problems. So it's important that we have a clap for them. Now, I'm introducing Kerry Waylen from the James Hutton Institute in Scotland. And what the title of her presentation is questioning the role of academic experts in science policy interfaces, reflections from engagement on sustainable agriculture. And she sent also a teaser for you is, what does it mean to be a post-normal expert in a non-post-normal world? Thank you, Kerry.
First of all, a quick summary. Obviously, as we've been discussing in the last day, so post-normal science is highlighting the urgent need to move beyond traditional expectations of how we produce knowledge and how we use it. However, we also know that the world is not yet post-normal. And so when we think about knowledge use, there still is a very dominant emphasis on the instrumental use of knowledge, i.e. the provision of objective facts for problem solving in line with the deficit model. And so what does this mean for actually trying to do post-normal science and the individual scientific experts involved? So the MAGIC approach, if you want to see more, there's links in the sidebar in the chat about quantitative storytelling. But this really is an attempt to put into practice the ethos of post-normal science. So we're connecting experts from different disciplines, scientific disciplines, to identify salient themes, to produce quantitative evidence on it, and then to reflect on that and potentially reframe how we understand the problems. And there could be a potential variety of different roles for experts, scientific experts, and how they're expected to use their knowledge. And potentially the post-normal science literature isn't super explicit about this. So it's interesting to use the MAGIC experience to see what happens. And just a quick note about the work I'm talking about, which is just one part of MAGIC, but CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, that was became a nexus, a focus for us as a nexus policy. Because it connects with so many areas. And we plan to try and engage particularly people from the European Commission who might be shaping the policy, but we also try to engage with other groups, particularly the European Parliament. So we were doing policy analysis, interviewing people, then we had the societal metabolism analysis, and if you'd like to know more about that, have a look on the MAGIC website, but that's the quantitative analysis. And then we were using that the outputs aim to use the outputs for discussion about how sustainable the world was, how desirable it was, what would you like to do differently, and ideally, hopefully, to have an ongoing cycle where we would update our analysis based on these conversations. I'm actually not clear if you can see the slides, but I'm going to press on anyway because I can't quite track all of this chat, and hopefully you'll understand what I'm saying even without seeing the slides. But they relate to the ones that are on YouTube, so if you're interested to know more, go and have a look there. So what actually happened in MAGIC? Did it go exactly as we thought? Well, we got off to a slow start. It was difficult to recruit policy stakeholders, and this is perhaps not surprising, but we didn't have that many personal contacts. They didn't have any mandate to engage with us. There was no explicit gatekeeper. And we chose deliberately to focus on the Commission. Perhaps we could or should have looked elsewhere as well. And our response to that as academics and in the process, was to try and often emphasize our relevance to them so that they would respond to our email, pick up the phone. And that often meant downplaying any potential provocative element of what might happen. I also tried more passive dissemination activity as a way to make contacts and start to build links. But this isn't exactly in line with the post-normal ideal. But we did succeed in actually having conversations and engaging with stakeholders. So this is a photograph to prove it from last November, and based at the in Brussels with several different DGs represented in this room. So great. So we were able to present the quantitative data to them. But then what happened? The responses we got did not always match the ideal of this discussion about reflection and reframing. So what did I say? So we managed to talk with people. That was great. But the responses and the conversations we had didn't always match up to what we'd be hoping for. So we did get quite challenging personal experiences where they would challenge the data. They challenge the terminology that we use. They would, some of them, but not all of them, ask for very specific recommendations about current policy problems. And so overall, it felt like many were unable or unwilling to acknowledge the problems indicated by the data. So we were explicit in this process of saying we think this indicates that European agriculture is unsustainable as it's at present. But we often didn't get agreement or even often explicit disagreement, just a kind of avoidance of the issue. We did see some new awareness of the nexus perspective and its implications. So we had quite visceral reactions from some. The quote there, "That was scary." And we had some new stakeholder assemblages, which we played a role in creating. So it wasn't completely avoiding it, but most people, most of the time, didn't really want to talk about the issues that we felt were important. And I think it's interesting how we reacted as well as the experts, the scientific experts anyway. So we reacted in multiple ways. So some of us would reinforce this kind of servicing role. If we got challenging, hostile even reactions, we would say, well, how can we better help you, support you? Some of us worked harder at relationship building. So that could fit well with the idea of the broker role. Some of us more directly started to critique policy, took more polemic positions, so fitting in with that advocacy role. And of course, all of us maybe were fluid and dynamic at this, taking multiple roles over time as we interacted with each other. So this was uncomfortable. And I know even for myself, sometimes I would completely downplay or not even mention my academic expertise and analyses and just focus entirely on relationship building and how much I understood the stakeholders I was trying to engage with. But isn't this underselling or reducing the value for the overall transdisciplinary process? So interesting challenges there. So in summary, the academic experts in magic adopted a variety of roles. And it's a shame you can't see my slides because I've got a great slide with lots of different hats on it. And we were having to wear lots of hats, sometimes all at once. And we can think about this as sort of trying to demonstrate and earn our credibility, legitimacy, and relevance. So those are Cash's terms or salience, but doing this in a non-post-normal world. So we're doing this in non-post-normal terms. And so overall, was the magic process consistent with post-normal science? Not perfectly, not with the ideal, though it was productive, I think. And this is because we're seeing pre-existing structures, processes, and practices challenging activities like QST. So, in conclusion, putting post-normal science into practice is challenging, including for individuals. And I think I've heard elsewhere, or certainly Roger will talk about this, the need to speak about uncomfortable knowledge, Steve Rayner's term, but also perhaps we need to think about uncomfortable roles, because there are multiple potential tensions experienced by the individuals who are trying to promote or implement post-normal science.
Thank you, Kerry. You did a wonderful job in spite of the gremlins, and I invite the audience to see Kerry's presentation with her wonderful hats and things. Now, without any delay, because we are a bit behind, I'll invite Lorenzo Benini from the European Environmental Agency. I won't say any more. He will explain everything himself. Lorenzo.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for this opportunity to share and reflect with you. Let me see if I'm a little bit more lucky in sharing my screen and slides. So, yep. So I work for the European Environment Agency. Very quickly, that's an EU institution, EU body, which deals with environmental assessments and sustainability assessments, and by mandate. So we report on the state trends and prospects for the environment and sustainability. And obviously we do this work by combining different forms of knowledge, right? So knowledge which comes from our network of countries, knowledge that comes from the scientific community, and we try to synthesize and communicate and identify potential issues for the environment. So just to give you a sense of the business model, and we do that in cooperation with countries, with the European Commission bodies. So we do not belong directly to the European Commission, but we work in interaction and partnership with them. But obviously, the key messages which emerge from such type of reports are very visible. They are built also on institutional engagement, and they provide policy support, actually. Policy support in framing, in assessing whether the objectives were met or not in relation to the environment. I think this is necessary to get a bit of the sense of the context within which I'm operating. So well, me in particular, I engage with the MAGIC project because I think it brings some novelty, and anyway, it's an institutional activity to engage from the European Environment Agency to engage with research projects, just to keep up to date with the latest knowledge developments and so on. So, I acted, if you like, as a gatekeeper, that was mentioned in the previous presentation, for facilitating some interactions. Although we were not formally, I think, we were not a partner of the project, but perhaps we were, we had some opportunities to engage. We didn't engage throughout all of the process of the project. Anyway, so we engaged in terms of some interviews on which narratives to prioritize. We co-organized a workshop to discuss the initial outcomes and approaches of the MAGIC project with EA staff and countries' representatives, and participated to dissemination events as well as other follow-up activities. Going to the meat of the question, how was this received by my colleagues and myself in some instances? Well, we got a range of mixed reactions out of these interactions. Some were negatives, ranging from avoidance, really lack of interest. So the issue did not raise any interest even in those who might have a fundamental stake in the topic because of thematic relevance. Sometimes raised some resistance. For instance, I remember some resistance in relation to criticisms raised on their circular economy, and also some criticisms related to the tone of the approach. On the other hand, and sometimes also delusion in respect to the fact that there was a lack of solutions-oriented knowledge, in a sense. It was more focusing on the problems rather than the solution. And on the other hand, we also had quite some positive feedbacks in terms of curiosity, sincere appreciation of the methodology, and also of the critical insights that the project brings to the fore. Yet, the use of such knowledge which comes out of MAGIC, especially at the time in which we had such interactions, which was not as developed as it is at the moment, at the end of the project with all of the more didactical videos. The use of that knowledge is not obvious in the EA context, I would say. I think that's a generalization which holds. Yet it has contributed to shed some light on issues around the resource nexus, and help in introducing that term in the context of the European Environment Agency, and to work on that line. At the same time, some of the outcomes or inspired by the project were used and found some place in high-level reports, like the State of the Environment and Outlook 2020, which was published at the end of the last year, which anyway is a 350 pages report. So I would say, to be fair, that the balance between, let's say, the uncomfortable type of knowledge that is brought into the picture there and the more comfortable and more, let's say, what the staff would say, more established type of knowledge is clearly towards the latter, right? So we found quite some space in some other products, for instance, in the Drivers of Change report, which we embrace more issues around uncertainty and complexity. But again, mostly it was an accessory or complementary role, never the main focus of the assessments. And I think we can all understand the reasons for which this is the case, because it's uncomfortable in a sense. But let's say the agency is not that unused to deal with some forms of uncomfortable knowledge. We criticized biofuels back then in 2006 already, and through the help of experts, we also worked on issues like late lessons from early warnings and so on. So, but this also helped in spreading the approach and the methodology in the context of our country network. In particular, there is an ongoing project in Sweden building on the QST, on the quantitative storytelling approach. So reflections out of this, and you obviously can learn more if you watch the video on the web. But anyway, reflections. The boundary organization, so science policy interface, the framings are always, well, not always, often given. And then, because this ensures legitimacy and salience and credibility for the organization. So it's not that easy to change such framings in a fast way or in a very disruptive way. So things take time and they require processing and the interactions. So it's a long-term evolution, I think. But the understanding of environmental and sustainability issues evolves and acknowledges increasingly acknowledges, I think, these type of issues. So I'm quite optimistic in a sense, because at least with my direct experience, I saw this happening in a sense. But again, it's a niche in an institution, if you like. And then this comes, I mean, next reflection to me is how to make this process, this change happening, well, being first of all acknowledged, because it seems it is not entirely acknowledged even from the MAGIC consortium, from what I can hear. But I think there are some positive signs which is important to acknowledge. On the other hand, there's probably a few suggestions, or anyway points for reflection that I feel the sharing now, which is about particularly the forms of engagement. I think we are moving in the EA towards co-development, co-creation of content, and this means listening to the needs of the different players which are working at the interface, and maybe creating a space, safe space for exploring options together. So working together constructively, and this is not super easy with uncomfortable type of knowledge, but it might also have to do with the jargon, the technical difficulties, and in the forms of engagement themselves. So this is the point for reflection. And I think it's a delicate balance, but working at the interface between the framing which is given in the in the context of such institutions, and the novelty that PNS brings to the fore, in particular MAGIC. I mean, using that form of ambiguity, at least as an entry point for creating opportunities, it might not be a bad idea. So it's a matter of positioning in relation to that, and using opportunities, I think, and creating the proximity and the trust with the stakeholders, in a sense. If that could ever happen, sometimes it cannot happen at all. And the last point is about communicating the issues. I think these concepts are complex. Reality is complex, and it's important to acknowledge that. But I think they can be communicated in a way which is less cumbersome for the staff, or the civil servants, and so on. So maybe there's some opportunity there. And also branding is selling, mind the term, if you don't mind the term, some forms of knowledge to be uncomfortable. Is that really the right entry point? I think it's very useful knowledge, but I'm not sure it's the very selling point that public institutions are able to reflect upon, or to buy on, if you like. And the very last point, maybe we're witnessing a fundamental crack in the system, or a series of fundamental cracks. This is creating new opportunities. So, and this is reflected also in the behavior or in the responses of some institutions. Here we have a plethora of things happening, and they are discussed in a recent report on drivers of change that I'll link on the web. But are we witnessing a Kuhnian revolution? Is that really the right moment to find the right alliances in the context? And I believe that there are some signs of this, and even the European Commission themselves initiated a series of strategic foresight reports, which is something very, very different from before. Anyway, I think I've taken enough time, so thanks for listening, and look forward to the next video.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo, and thank you for participating in this panel, in this session, and in our symposium. I think it's a very important perspective that you bring to the debate. And some of the points are like Kerry's point about, how to be a post-normal researcher or scientist in a non-post-normal world, or Lorenzo's idea about what are the right, if I may so inverted commas, entry points. Sometimes we, from the outside, now that I've been in both sides, my revolving doors in the past, I was on one side and now in the other side, I think it's important for all those watching that we cannot tell the person who comes from advice that he's asking the wrong questions. Okay, it's up to us to rework the questions in a collaborative way. Thank you. And now I think I took too much time, but I will introduce Thomas and Roger. They are both part of the University of Bergen, the Center for Wetenskap Theory, of which I'm also part. So please, Thomas and Roger, it's your turn.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi. So we'll just briefly remind you of some of the main points we made in our video. So it's a bit of a recap, and we will be talking about a policy area called circular economy. And Roger, myself, and our colleague Zora Kovacic got interested in this policy area of circular economy during the project, as did some others in the project. And so we just want to remind you of some of the conceptual points we were making and some of the more analytical points. So the starting point was the assessment that the economy as such cannot be fully circular. So circular economy as such cannot exist, yet somehow it does exist. European Commission even claimed in 2019 that the circular economy already has been delivered, at least in terms of the action plans European Commission set out. So how to think about a circular economy then? Mario and Silvio talked about it as a policy legend, a way to deal with uncomfortable knowledge. And we approached it from the angle of collective imagination. So we talked about the socio-technical imaginary of circularity. And what this does is collective imagination, not in the sense of fantasies, but as collectively shared and institutionalized ideas about where we as a society want to go. So in the sense, it's a way to critically engage with futures, but also a way to analyze contingencies in policymaking. And imaginaries can be seen in policy documents. They appear in public statements of officials, but we decided to look at how imaginaries appear in indicators. And we looked at the monitoring framework for the circular economy. And we did that with inspiration from Esther Turnhout, who once said, only what is counted counts. So in this way, we were arguing that the monitoring framework is not actually measuring a progress towards a circular economy somewhere in the future, but actually it's creating this measurable object that is the circular economy. So those were kind of the conceptual points we made in the video. And some analytical points, just to remind you, we talked about a gradual shift in the policy. So it's from being a policy on waste management, it developed into a more expansive policy, including an increasing amount of other policy areas and growing in that way. Also, it grew to a kind of into a techno-optimist model of transformation. So very often when we did interviews and had focus groups, people would say, no, circular economy is not a revolution. It is a gradual transformation. And some other important analytical points we raised or tried to direct attention to were some gaps in a monitoring framework. Of course, there were gaps in data when measuring waste, so questions about wastewater, food waste, how much of the actual waste can be measured with the data that are available. We also pointed to a gap in indicators, that is that issues of repair, reuse, sharing kind of tended to be missing from the indicator framework. So the question then becomes, where's the modern waste that the circular economy policy was promising? And then we pointed towards a gap in political imagination. So there is actually no idea of how this transition towards a circular economy will take place. It's still very much an innovation imperative, talking about patents, talking about technological fixes that will bring about the circular economy. And this then brought us back to the idea that it's not only that there needs to be a quantifiable measurement of our progress towards a circular economy, there also needs to be a shift in imagination and what we can imagine as circularity. And with that, I think those were the main points we made in the video, and what they raised, and also what Kerry and Lorenzo raised, is then how to talk about these issues in a project like MAGIC that wanted to get at careful engagement. And for this, I will give the word to you, Roger.
Yeah, I think we still have a couple of minutes left before we pass it on to the next speaker, and then we move into the plenary discussion afterwards. So this is a symposium on post-normal science. So, of course, one of the let's say deeper insights that I think are communal to post-normal science, but science and technology studies and philosophy of science, is that facts are value-laden, but also that values are fact-laden. So, in a sense, how do we engage with something like the circular economy? And if you saw the videos, you would also see the Mario Giampietro explain, in a way, why, from an ecological economics point of view, that the economy cannot be circular. So, in a way, that would be an example of this kind of uncomfortable knowledge that is perhaps not always well received. And Lorenzo made a strong argument why perhaps uncomfortableness or discomfort is a bad selling point. I mean, of course, it's not a selling point from our point of view, it's an analytical point, and it was introduced by Steve Rayner as a way to explain how knowledge is not taken up, because to take it up would require the possibility of institutional change. So Lorenzo talked about possible crack in the institutions. It could be cracks, but perhaps also the combination of an analysis of the type that Mario delivered, an analysis of the type that Thomas just represented, could also be combined to present some kind of insights that we don't have to call them uncomfortable, but somehow they are missing. They are missing in the policy imaginaries. I think the main example would be that many of the indicators and, say, the content of the circular economy policies revolve around the degree of recycling in material flows. Whereas I guess that Mario, who could detail this later, would say that is actually the wrong indicator if you're concerned with sustainability. You should rather be worrying about the protection of the integrity of biophysical funds. Now, it's well possible to say that could be, we could call that a degree of circularity. It would be totally possible to think of that as an indicator of circularity, and that could influence the development of policies that we could decide to call circular economy if we wish to do so. And in that way, perhaps also, the suggestion would be less uncomfortable. That might be a discussion point later. I think we've spent our 8 minutes there, and I'll stop there and pass it on back to Silvio to move on.
Yes, thank you, Thomas and Roger. Again, we see some important points raised here and show that we are actually, we are not following certain line of thought. I mean, all us participating in the team doing this research are reflecting and trying to construct new ideas and innovation all the time, to think new ways of just influencing the events and policies, and trying to introduce new ideas about what is the techno-scientific inputs into all these policy processes. Now, I see that Ângela has changed her hat from the back room trying to solve technical problem now. So Ângela Guimarães Pereira, our own and only from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. It's your turn.
Thank you, Silvio. I'm going to talk about engagement, and because I work for the European Commission, not in a policy DG, in a DG in a science for policy DG. This makes also my reflection a little bit different from those that work on academia in what regards engagement. So we started this project with great ambition in terms of engaging policymakers in the whole process of examination of nexus policy narratives, and also on the idea of building new ones. And because we were looking at nexus related to EU policies, and because one of the services of the Commission, mine, was part of the project, we thought that engaging with different services of the Commission would be greatly facilitated. It turned out that this wasn't straightforward. And this is true not only for the Commission, but also for other types of the administration. I think our most successful and example of engagement has been the European Environment Agency. Not by chance, we had Lorenzo here with us. But in general, not all actors were engaged in the expected processes. Neither these processes actually delivered the expected, and nor they were engaged at the desired stage and the imagined formats. And what we can see after 4 years is that we did a large degree of adaptation to the challenges we faced on engaging with some actors, because we wanted to pursue our ambition, meaning that we want to deliver a methodology that works by ensuring that relevant actors are part of the process. So with whom did we engage? And this links me to the idea of extended peer community, so central to the post-normal science. We cannot talk about extended peer community here in isolation to what the project produced, which is a great deal of so-called uncomfortable knowledge, as Reiners coined in 2012. And so my question now is, with whom did we engage? Reiners' explanation of uncomfortable knowledge also included a suggestion of institutional strategies to cope with the discomfort posed by it. So he talked about denial, dismissal, diversion, and displacement. But I hear, instead of using these strategies, I want to propose a very maybe simplistic mapping of some archetypes of actors' positions, agency, and positioning within those coping strategies. And so for the moment, and you will see my slides, I love fishes. And so my slides on these archetypes are actually 4 fishes. And one of the fishes is a gatekeeper. Gatekeeper, the maintainer, so the maintainer of a narrative. And here we can distinguish the believers and nurturers, and those that have just a job to do, which does not mean that they don't see the problems with the policy narratives we were examining, but they have a job to do and they will do it. Then there are also the disempowered civil servants, CSOs, and so on, which are well-intentioned and that probably have not been in the institutions for a long time, sometimes, and so they are listeners and actually try to bring in new ideas and even dare to challenge the status quo. So they're very brave. And if they are persistent enough, they actually in the long term can nurture institutional transformation. And then there are also the sharks, which try to use the knowledge to opportunistically justify other agendas, and that are not exactly, in our case, we're not sometimes exactly corresponding with Magic's values and ethos. And this we find a lot on lobbying, for example, on lobbyists. And then there are the fourth one that I call the Dories, that they listen, they move on with their ordinary jobs and somehow are forced to forget that they know better. I must say that none of these archetypes have a face. What we found in our engagements is that, as in most things in life, we are all a bit of everything, depending on context, including the relational. It happened to us that in the same in-depth interview about the policy narratives we were examining, we could discover different aspects of both Rainer's strategies and also the interviews positioning on them. In my mind, this means that we were able to create safe spaces where those that engaged in our project found the comfort to deal with the uncomfortable. And I think this is a big achievement of the MAGIC project. However, I think we can detect some errors that ought to be corrected in future projects. For example, financing a science for policy project that has no pre-agreed connection to the policy-making process is ineffective, to say the least, in the sense that the experiment is diverted to find the terms of others to get attention to our developments, instead of experimenting on how to co-create these shared spaces of deliberation in everybody's terms. So in a nutshell, I think in terms of engagement, this project delivered several things. First of all, it proposes engagement as a place of work. So the idea that engaging with the extended peer community is the new way of working, as PNS tell us. As workplace, the relevant competencies, tools, and procedures of engagement lead the co-creation and circulation of knowledge that informs science, technology, or policy development. So engagement as workplace. But to do so, there are two important dimensions of experimentation that need to continue. First, on the terms. I think in the beginning, the MAGIC project attempted to impose a preconceived standard of mean-making and structure when engaging with others. And this is not a good strategy in engaging the extended peer community. So we need to negotiate these terms. And in this negotiation also encompasses the building of spaces where engagements can take place. MAGIC developed a lot of online spaces and purposeful spaces to engage. And what we found out is that when we would engage in spaces where our extended peer communities were already going, this was much more viable. Then another thing is about, we talked about a lot about the engagement being facilitated by serendipity and momentum, and in the sense that this has been beneficial for us to meet others. But I would like to suggest that the obvious engagement with the obvious influencers to the MAGIC process is probably not enough. I would argue that the effort needs to go into engaging with latency and activism. The idea that influence is volatile and at the same time emergent, and more so at these times. So what I want to say is that there are a lot of people making meanings and doing their own thing out there to solve collective matters of concern with regards to the water, energy, food nexus. This happens, for example, on the form of collective action initiatives to tame the so-called energy transition, or the DIY ecology and agriculture, alternative consumption groups, and so on and so forth. So the extended peer community does not consist solely of those under the lamp, but needs to convive with latency and activism. And in fact, at a late stage in the project, we have engaged in one of the case studies, people that are precisely engaging in these terms, in this transformation. Finally, and last but not least, in a next wave of Science for Policy project funding, engaging policymakers and civil servants means including them as knowledge holders and not as users or beneficiaries. There is a lot of uncomfortable knowledge in these institutions as well to be exchanged with others. And linking this to my first remarks, engagements were not straightforward, and probably these have to something to do with this understanding of engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ângela. So we have 30 official minutes for the questions, and then of course we have the coffee space to continue for those interested, or also those who can do it. I mean, we'll start with, I assume our speakers have read the questions in the chat. So I will start with Thomas and Roger, and then I will ask the Kerry to follow on perhaps Violetta's question, and Lorenzo on Zora's on the subject of uncomfortable knowledge that created some chats and movement. So please, Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there were many interesting questions in the chat that each of them could have deserved a session of their own. The first one was the one about transdisciplinary approaches, and I think many of us would agree that that transdisciplinary approaches are very much in the spirit of postnormal science, and indeed some would say that postnormal science is an example or is an instance of a transdisciplinary approach, perhaps. So I would. The only thing that I would add is that it has been important for me and also for other thinkers in the postnormal science tradition to insist that transdisciplinarity, or sometimes interdisciplinarity, or with community-based research, whatever kind of favored approach that we would like to work out of and into, are they never offer a quick fix of any of the problems that we're talking about here, because the problems that we are addressing are deep structural and institutional problems. And whatever method or approach that suddenly is being launched as the latest discovery is never a quick fix. And sometimes actually the belief that it is a quick fix is an additional problem to getting any further, perhaps. So that would be the answer to that question. Then I wanted to follow up a little bit, and perhaps Thomas would like to add something on both in the chat and with the questions, and also between the speakers of this session, which is perhaps related also to assessing magic as an experience in a post-normal project that has been, in a way, engaging with and criticizing the European Union institutions, actually the same institutions that funded it. So the first thing I would like to comment, is that in my experience, it has been easier to get a research grant from the European Commission for a project that criticizes the European Commission than has been the case with, for instance, the Research Council of my own country, Research Council of Norway. And to some extent, a project like this is perhaps also a kind of anomaly. I guess if you want a big research project that criticizes Microsoft, you probably wouldn't go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And yet we turn to the European Union to get funding to go into deep criticism of the shortcomings of European institutions, and sometimes we get them. And that, I think, is remarkable. Still, these projects are probably anomalies because most of the projects in this kind of funding schemes are not like this at all. Right? A sort of snapping at the hand that feeds you. And then we may discuss, how can it be more effective, less effective? I've been arguing in the Nexus Times, for instance, that perhaps the focus on immediate impact and effectiveness is part of the problem. Perhaps we do this more out of a kind of urge ethics of care, where we try to do what we believe is right, not really trying to force through a reform or a revolution, but perhaps just trying to do what we believe is right in order to enact a certain disturbance that perhaps or perhaps not may have a long-term effect in these institutions. I think both post-normal science and also for those of us who are working with RRI, Responsible Research and Innovation, which has some similarities, the idea of being a kind of constructive disturbance or annoyance, and living with the people, caring for, but also challenging the people in these institutions is a kind of work ethic that I would subscribe to. I see that Silvio says something. Is Thomas allowed to add something, or?
Please, if you want to complete Roger's answer.
Yes, I wanted to add a little thing on the question of transdisciplinarity, because one could argue that the idea of extended peer communities and extended fact mirrors this idea of transdisciplinarity. And of course, just throwing these words as a problem doesn't necessarily solve the problem already. So the question then is, why is it so difficult? And I think what we wanted to do is kind of approach the problem through careful engagements, which means long-term engagement, building on trust and establishing trust. And I think Lorenzo is a great example for this, because he was selling himself a bit short by describing himself as a gatekeeper, because at least in my experience, he was much more than that for the Magic Project, a valuable epistemic actor, for example. And this then
Thank you. Sorry, Thomas, we can go back, but I want to give the opportunity to all the other participants. I think the points you made are very important. I just, before giving word to Kerry, I want to mention that this symposium is quite special because of the COVID circumstances, etc., and that it's very European-centered, or has been up to now. And I invite you to think and imagine situation of engagement, participation, extended peer communities, challenges to authority in some other areas where it's not only difficult, but many times it's also dangerous. So I'll invite you, we have a session for tomorrow, day after. I don't have the program with me, on power and post-normal science, with two panelists from outside Europe, one from Mexico and one from Brazil. So I invite you to participate, so perhaps to see how the rest of the world is coping with the same problems we are dealing here. Please, Kerry.
Yeah, that certainly puts things in perspective, Silvio. If we're talking about uncomfortable knowledge, uncomfortable roles, we don't generally face any overt hostility or grave personal consequences from our work, do we? So, yeah, the question that you tasked me was Violetta's question. So Violetta asked about if we could handle the different roles that we play differently during stakeholder interactions and perhaps only adopt one role to avoid confusion. I don't think confusion is the problem. I think we have to accept that we're going to be acting and dynamically and interacting with each other. It's actually sometimes, it's just human nature. It'd be odd if we were like robots and we all reacted the same way to the same circumstances. What I think we do need is to plan for this a bit more explicitly and to reflect on what the limits are. What do we think are the acceptable limits for, I don't know, advocacy roles? Are we okay as in the academic team of being really strongly advocacy? Are some of us going to be like others not? So we're talking about this. How might the situation play out? What's the point of view of the stakeholders likely to be? Ângela mentioned, they've got their own expertise and expectations. How may we react to that? Because, we don't know them, but we can guess. So thinking this stuff through rather than just having a very idealistic sense that they're going to drop down before us and say, goodness me, post-normal science is great. I completely abandon my pre-existing ways of thinking. Because that's not going to happen. And it's quite unlikely. It's even less likely to happen if you haven't kind of thought about where they're coming from. So that's my kind of reaction to that. And I think that relates to the idea of impact as well, that conversation thread. So we did actually make a kind of very brief half-page planned impact before each event that we held, but it wasn't necessarily about solving the immediate policy problems. It was mostly about what I would call conceptual impact. So in the science policy interface literature, generally that's the most that you can hope for generally is changing how people are thinking. And then we were trying to be very specific about, well, exactly what kinds of ways are we trying to change how they think? What kind of learning or new perspectives are we hoping to foster? And often we realise that we're being quite ambitious because we're expecting multiple things. So, I just think all these comments are quite connected and it's really interesting. I think I'd love to talk more about the idea of power and control, but we'll let the other speakers get to that.
Thank you. Lorenzo, there is a question in the chat from Zora. And she raises the interesting question about the relation of knowledge and action, which, is one of the fundamental questions that post-normal science has addressed from the beginning. So can you try to say something about this?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Zora. I take it from a very pragmatic perspective from within the institution. I think what was presented in the workshops we had and interactions out of the MAGIC project was not clear whether the way that could respond to some policy questions. So for the audience who was not familiar with the concepts per se, so it wasn't clear how to make use that under the framing defined by the institutions within which we are operating. So that's the type of reality. Of course, there's a value, and the value is perhaps to criticize the framing or to portray a different understanding of or a different framing as such. But then, in order to let's say show that value to the civil servant or the person target of such communication, then you need a process. You need to engage. You need engagement. You need to understand the needs and to build trust. And on that basis, I think you can really show what the value of the uncomfortable knowledge is. Also in the context, which at the first glance does not seem receptive of that type of knowledge. I hope I was responding enough to the question. We can continue in the session as well.
Okay. Now I will. There are a couple of questions from Mookie. One is specifically for Roger, but the other is for all the panels. I will ask Mario to say something about it.
Okay. Yes, I would talk a little bit about Swedish example, because we are the one working with the Swedish Environmental Agency. But I want to get back a little bit about the uncomfortable knowledge, is that if the things are going well, you don't need uncomfortable knowledge. If the things are going very badly, you need uncomfortable knowledge to learn how to do something different. It's about the surviving of the institution. Institutions are types. They don't evolve in time. They have to become something else. So if you are behaving when you are 64 the same way that you were behaving when you were 14, and someone tell you, look, you cannot do these things because you are no longer 14, now you are 64, this is an uncomfortable knowledge that could be useful. So what, in my view, the institutions do not understand that is about their survival. If they keep doing this, they are just losing legitimacy. They will be gone. They have to find another job very soon. And with the type of situation we are having now, we're not talking about 100 years. We're talking about in a couple of decades, if there is not a robust change in the way all this technocratic bureaucracy is operating, they will be looking for another job. So it is amazing the fact that the problem is our problem, and we are flagging that there is some problem that everybody knows. And you say, how you dare tell me that this is not true? I'm trying to help.
Mario,
let me finish about Sweden. So what we did after the meeting we had with the environmental at the Environmental European Agency, we were contacted by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency to see whether or not, by using our approach, they could get more robust analysis about the plan of decarbonizing Sweden in 30 years, 20 years. And then we are, as a matter of fact, working on it. I don't know, but I mean, this exactly is useful for whom? For preserving what? For preserving the institution, for preserving the well-being of the society, for preserving, because it is a little bit tricky to decide what is the usefulness of knowledge unless you don't have a purpose of the use of it.
Yes, I think I have to call Tessa on Maddalena, who this morning did a better job than me to control Mario's time. Anyway, Roger, do you want to answer now?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions that can be answered very simply and in the affirmative. So Muki made the point about the ecological costs of more data and sensing. And I think we just thoroughly agree with the point. And in a way, this also responds to the point made by Anne van Bruggen about practical ways of the circular economy becoming something else than just a bubble of collecting data in agencies, etc. So I think that the concept of deep innovation that was actually mentioned in that question, that I think of a reference to Kjetil Rommetveit, of the idea of social innovation that is really social innovation, that begins with the communities and the question of the good life, the question of the good life in the communities, if we are going to transform to sustainability, or what is needed there, what are the small scale experiments. I think in one way, I tend to be optimistic about the European Green Deal, because perhaps that could also be an opportunity for the circular economy to become something else and something more than a kind of technocrat bubble. If that could be something about how do we run businesses, how do we run communities, and couple that idea with knowledge from, say, ecological economics, that isn't the worst thing that we could think of, I think.
Yes, you're right. I'm asking Ângela to come in. We have some time yet. So if Lorenzo or Kerry want to add something, just have been browsing the chat, which is incredibly rich. I mean, I hope we can keep track of all these questions and then find a way to answer outside the session itself. So if someone wants, otherwise I will ask Ângela to come in and try to complete her presentation, which she tried to do it quite fast. Kerry? No?
Well, just an observation, really, that I think a few of the questions relate to the difficulty of trying to affect change in complex multi-level governance systems, but that's the norm rather than the exception. So there's a comment there about problems of trying to do research in Colombia in the 1990s, and someone else saying, well, European institutions are just really difficult to make change because they've got so many interests and actors and levels to take account of. But I think this is the norm, so we have to find a way to work with this. Easier said than done, but we can't just look for simple situations to practice post-normal science in.
Thank you. Lorenzo?
Just a very quick reaction on Mario's point about uncomfortable knowledge, and then also pass it on to Ângela directly. It's just that that process is not that easy. It's not that straightforward, and we need some qualities in terms of managing that type of discomfort. That's the thing. So it's not that it's not useful. It's very useful, of course. But the question is that if somebody comes, if you have never met and tells you you're doing everything wrong, I mean, it requires some process, and I guess that's what Ângela also tried to do in the context of the project.
Okay, Ângela, perhaps you want to add something, and perhaps say something about our policy event at the end of September?
No, I just want to, restate my last point in terms of engagement, and I think it is a sign of the same way we talk about respectful relationships when we engage with citizens, and that we, when you do this type of work, I think here again, when we, as researcher, engage with institutions, other institutions, we had to have the same type of respect, because there is, as I say, I don't think the institutions we engaged with are users or beneficiaries. They are knowledge holders as well. And so the relationship needs to be respectful in that sense. Then, yes, thank you for reminding me, Silvio, about the policy event. On the 30th of September between 4 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. we will have a policy event. It is already quite crowded and well attended, so please register for it. I'm going to copy here in the chat of the stage the link. We will have not only people from the consortium, but also discussants from the policy arena that will make the debate more interesting.
Thank you, Ângela. So those interested, please look at the link, and I will now ask Mario to. Well, we have 5 minutes of official time left. So Mario, as the glue of the project and leader, I ask you to say a few things, and then I will close the session mentioning again our project manager, Sandra Bookens, who really, she was after every detail of the project. I mean, she kept us awake and active. So, Mario?
Yes, what I can say, this has been really an incredible ride. It was, we didn't have exactly clear what we wanted to do, so this has been an airplane that's been continuously changed while flying. Of course, we don't have the solution. Nobody has the solution. It is reacting to a message of Jerry. This is something will take 40, 50 years. We don't have 40, 50 years at the moment. We don't have. On the other hand, I fully agree with Roger that doing bad plan is much better than not doing plan. So trying to force a solution that we don't have is the worst possible scenario. So nobody knows what to do, let's be honest. And then it would be very, very important that we collectively learn how to construct a different society, a different idea what we have to do. Of course, this session show clearly that there are a lot of different aspects to be considered, how to do a better perception, how to do a better communication, how to have the involvement of the people. For sure, there is something that science, the sustainability science, the official science, is very bad at, is to deal with the psychological aspect, because it is true that you have a psychic structure in people and a psychic structure in institution. You have a psychic structure in the society. So the society can have a problem of delirium or problem of hallucination, exactly like people. And this is something that we cannot handle in scientific terms. I think that we should really, really learn how to understand that there is an irrational part, the passional part. This is one of the main point of post-normal science. And this, in a way, we are not capable of handling well. So, I mean, it's been fantastic. We did an enormous amount of work. So now we are doing all these reporting things. I invite everyone to go to on the website to see all the different teams worked on different aspects, water, environment, whatever. And I believe that in terms of post-normal science, this helped us a lot in trying to do something different. That at least...
Thank you, Mario. Before ending the session, which was been interesting, also because there was, as I said before, I'm repeating myself, but the excellent questions and comments in relation to some of the last comments by Mario and others. Antonio Gramsci, most of you know that I always quote Gramsci, and around the 1920s said famously that history teaches, but it has no pupils. I think that what we are trying to do in post-normal science is to show that Gramsci was wrong. Through a transformation of science and society, we can actually change for the better, and that we can learn from history. But of course, if we are already beyond the age of control and prediction, so we are going to have to experiment, and experiments are painful because we are going to make mistakes. But I suggest people think about the alternatives. Roger, please.
Yeah, sorry about the camera suddenly not working. I think you concluded wonderfully, Silvio, on the on the intellectual dimension, and then I have a practical thing I wanted to say, which is throughout the MAGIC project, we had a very lively discussion that was performed as a newsletter that was online in the MAGIC website. And hopefully within some hours, actually, we have produced this was called the Nexus Times. And we are producing, as we are talking, a book out of this, the Nexus Times, a compilation of the newsletter. And that will be it will be open access. So it will be freely available as a PDF in the first instance, later on Amazon and Kindle. But hopefully within a couple of days, we have the PDF, and then we will find a way to disseminate this so that everybody can download it.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, incredibly, we are 16:31. So I will consider the session finished and close the session, but I invite you to, if you see the menu, it says sessions, there is coffee, and there is good company and good conversation. Thank you very much, and I'll see you very soon.